Hello everyone, welcome back to Distant Worlds Universe. In this episode, we're going to be looking towards beginning the process of exploring Kurbus beyond our home moon of Reese. But before we get to that, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everybody for your comments and support on the first episode. I was quite pleasantly surprised by the reaction, and I hope it continues to be enjoyable and informative for everybody. Please continue to let me know what you think and any suggestions down in the comments. So, need to revisit the research here because 1% in each category after a month in the game is lame. And so we really need to boost, again, up to our TERP level and gain a lot more from our current output. To do that, I'm going to retrofit, get to see retrofitting in action for the first time, our existing spaceport. Now we can still, of course, use the construction yards and docking bays and all of that we previously built on it while it's being retrofitted. And it doesn't cost any more to do like a partial build and then add on as compared to building it all at once, but we get to utilize those other components. So that's the advantage of doing it this way. If we try to edit, well, can't do that. It's already in use. Need to use the copy as new to make a new design based on this one, and that is what we want to do. Of course, any design that's not in service, we can just hit the edit and do it that way. So copy as new. And then for this, I'm going to want to add some construction yards as well. And then we'll throw in some plants to go with those. Docking bays. I like using the ×5 edition when it's convenient. Add a cargo bay, just boosting our capacity a bit. And then on the labs themselves, they have an output of 30,000 each. So say we had one of each kind. That'd be 90,000. And to get to the 500,000 plus we need about half a dozen of each, which is how I'm going to lay it out, but we don't have to do it this way. We could, for example, tilt it by doing like, say, 9 weapons labs and 3 high-tech or whatever to lean the research in that direction. It's probably best early in the game to actually focus a little more on the energy to get into warp drive and all of that sooner, but I'm just going to keep it simple and evenly distribute. And then, of course, we will need to add on to all this. And by the way, you can see the research amounts here if you're not sure you've got the right amount, manufacturing there, etc. Going to add on Hab and Life. We need, 5 more of those. And then, of course, we need reactors. And as it happens, boosting up to 3 reactors is just enough energy here. So that is our Reese spaceport. We'll keep the Mark II appellation. And then to get this done, there's multiple different ways, as there often is. We could select the spaceport here, or we can use these side quick selectors, spaceports. There we go. We can retrofit this way, or right-click here and retrofit, or we can do my preferred method in the construction yards. And as much as I will bash the UI in this game for various reasons, the fact that it's this versatile in terms of giving you multiple different ways that are available to you to get something done is a real positive point in its corner. So, if we hop back out here, we can see the retrofitting has begun. Now let's take a look at Kurbus a bit. If we begin to zoom out, of course, again, one of the positive things we have is other moons nearby us, and of course the gas giant at Kurbus 10. But there are not so good things as we zoom out further. We can see this sort of mini-map overview of the system. All of these red dots here, these are the gas giants. Of course, the green is us. And then we have a couple other things worth noting. There's these little like pyramid things of white crates or whatever those are. These are ruins. We need to investigate these as quickly as possible. There's always at least 1 and usually 2 on your homeworld. There are also 2 of these triangles which are not exactly the same thing. If we come and look at this one, these are derelict ships. Those are also worth investigating as quickly as possible. So lots of things to be done. And again, those always exist on your home world. Then there's this, like orange X type thing. What is going on with that? I think we're roughly in the right area. There we go. Well, these are space slugs. Call them space creatures. I'm not a particularly big fan of space creatures in games, even though I know they do serve a significant purpose. But these are hostile, and they will attack us if we get too close. But you can see the speed is very slow. It's only a speed of 7. So these are pretty weak, but we have no ships with weapons at all and won't anytime in the immediate future. So that's going to cause a bit of a problem. And then if we look at the basic terrain of the system, aside from what we have nearby, I mean, we've got planets here, and, you know, they're pretty much the closest thing, more over here, and almost everything else on the other side of the system. The fact that we're on the outside, up in this direction, means a long travel time with potential interruptions from the space slugs. This is not a good way to start out, except for our nearby potential. So hopefully there's some good stuff over there. But to find out what all is going on, we will need to build some ships, and that's going to be our next design aspect to look into. I did want to mention one other thing, is that if we zoom out all the way past this level, you can see this green here, and outside of this is no longer Kurbus, it's the interstellar medium. But the importance of this green here is this is the system diameter, and that's what's going to be used to measure range for our ships. These little orbital pathways for the planets are not, and these can in fact be very close in, or they can go almost all the way out to the system diameter, but that's not how you measure it. You measure it by this, so that's important to keep in mind. Getting back then to Reese itself, let's take a look at designing, and we're going to want an exploration ship. And I always like to use the surveyor name because that's really more what its job is. We know where the planets are, but we need to survey them. And then we're going to, of course, add a command center. We do need to have engines. So the ion thruster is your primary propulsion to push the ship forward, and directional thrusters for the turning or maneuvering. And then, of course, we will always need hab and life. As we continue down, we'll add a reactor. Notice that right now, there is nothing going on over here, even though we have engines, thrusters on the ship. But once you add a reactor, this comes to life, and there's a whole bunch of fun items going on over here. But notice, range is still 0, because we have no fuel. Engines don't go far without that. And then the one remaining component is the resource profile sensor, and this is what makes an exploration ship. It's what defines it, because this allows you to quickly know what resources are available, if any, at a planet or moon or whatever it is that you're trying to assess. So there we are, the smallest possible exploration ship that we could have. Now let's see what's going on with this movement, because this is new. Our range is 52% of that system diameter. That does not mean they're like halfway there and back. It means 52% would be the total distance, so only a quarter of the way there and back. And we're probably going to be moving on all sorts of different vectors with this ship. We're going to want a much larger number. I would recommend at least 150%. I'm going to try to go around 200%. And then with the speed and the energy curve and all of this, of the 4 categories, impulse is basically just station keeping. That is, you're at a planet just trying to keep up with the orbital motion or whatever. Hyper is warp travel. We're not going to be seeing that anytime soon. Sprint is emergency situations. You're trying to escape from danger, severe combat situations, that kind of thing. But cruise is what we're going to be spending almost all the time doing in the pre-warp period. And because of that, because it's going to be taking a long time to get from one place to another, I don't even care about the turn rate. The cruise speed is the only thing that concerns me. Now the energy bit here, the cruise requires 2 energy, but then sprint requires 4. This is taken out of the energy's excess output. So you really want to make sure that if you have a lot of engines on your ship, you also need to have the energy to power them. And if you look at the difference in energy, but the difference in speed isn't very much. And that's because of the quality, or shall we say lack thereof, of our ion thrusters. Now they will give 520 thrust at cruise, but for twice the energy they only give a little bit more, 600 thrust. And so the afterburner or emergency power, or whatever you want to call it, is not great. But it's basic and functional, and that's what we would expect for an entry-level tech. Now also worth noting is if you run out of fuel, you aren't crippled or dead in the water. You can still travel, but you'll go at 1/3 the normal speed. And since it's going to take a long time to get anywhere anyway, we don't want that to happen. But it doesn't completely, leave you unable to move, probably for not being too punishing of a gameplay aspect. Okay, so to make this ship better, we have got to add more range and more speed because there's really nothing else useful we can add to it. So if we add the fuel cells here, look at what happens to our speed and our acceleration and range and all of that. So the range went way up, but acceleration went down, turn rate went down, and our speed went down 13 to 11. We hit it again, we get the same basic effect. Now if we add on thrusters, we have what you might expect as well. Speed is going to go up, acceleration is going to go up, and range will go up because of efficiency's sake and improved acceleration, I believe. But if you continue to add these on, eventually you reach a point. There we go, went down from 193 to 190. So at a certain point, like the increased thrust can't improve the ship's operation enough to boost its range, and it'll start going backwards. So we're going to throw another hab, another life. And of course, that's just going to slow the thing down and give it less range because it's more mass. And what happens here is there is diminishing returns. It's sort of, the idea is sort of like if you've heard the phrase, the tyranny of the rocket equation. You know, the idea that after a certain point of adding more fuel and thrusters, you're simply adding more fuel and thrusters to push your fuel and thrusters around. You're not actually gaining enough to make it worth throwing more on. And that does happen at a certain point, but we've got to judge, okay, when is that going to be? So if we look at our speed now is at 30, and we add more, because we're at about that 200% range mark. 34. Oh, it only went up 3 there to 37, to 40, to 43. Okay, that's pretty consistent. One more is 45, so it's slowing down. And for me, that's the break point. It's only going up by 3. That's fine. It only goes up by 2. Probably not worth that next thruster on this particular ship. And each ship's got its own line, but this is where I'm going to call it. This is the design I'm going to use. But let's see what happens if we tried to max it out and just keep right on going. So let's say we added a couple more fuel cells, because we can go up to 160 size. And then, okay, we got plenty of range there. Let's add more thrusters. Oh, we're going to need another hab and life now. And keep right on going. 159, and one more. Okay, this is illegal. Interesting that it's a yellow warning, but perhaps you'd want to do a design if you're about to get a better tech or whatever. We wouldn't be able to build it, though. So let's knock that back down. Okay, so we have slightly better range than we did, but we had 43 speed before. We added a bunch more stuff, paying almost 50% more for the design, and didn't get that much more speed out of it, 43 to 49. And the other point to notice, again with the energy, is look at our sprint. Our sprint is actually much worse than cruise, because if we entered sprint mode, we don't have nearly enough. We would need 60, 4 times 15 energy to fully operate at sprint mode, and yeah, that's really bad. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And if we drop back down again now to where the design we're going to use, there we go. Another reason to use this point is that if we added even one more thruster, we would not be able to fully utilize our engines at sprint. Because then, we're only using 39 energy, and so there's one more energy that would be needed for that full utilization. So I'm going to stick with this. Now, in any game that has ship design, there's always a big question: how good is the game at doing designs of its own? And that's a mixed bag when it comes to, I'm going to turn on all the designs here, but when it comes to Distant Worlds. However, this design is really good that they have done. The Navigator. Notice that the size of it, the cost for maintenance, the purchase cost, all nearly identical to ours. And so it won't be a surprise that we pop in here. They've got one more directional thruster for a little better turning. They have one more fuel cell for better range, but they have one fewer thruster, so they're not as fast. We have a advantage of them at 6, maybe 15% faster. That's noticeable, but not a huge amount. And like I said, they have the additional range and turning rate, which will mitigate that a little bit. I still like my design better. I would pick it, but this is a reasonably competitive and definitely not in any sense an embarrassing design that they've come up with. So I'm going to want to get 2 of these ships in operation right away. We're going to go to our construction yards, of course. and get those rolling. And then we can advance. And as we do so, we can watch the progress. Here they come up. And we're given names of them. The Slippery Prize is our first one, procedurally generated. We can see everything orbiting around, and we can also advance the speed to 4 times speed, or down to 1/4 speed. And of course, the people on the planet are doing the retrofitting for the space station, while the crew of the space station does the exploration ship. So it's sort of a 2-for-1 deal there. And the retrofitting of the station costs 4,000 plus another 1,000 each for the exploration ship. So we still have most of our initial bankroll, but we just spent a pretty good part of it. Well, hello. The Black Market Cartel. Greetings to our victims. You may have noticed that we're about to attack you, but for the small price of 267 credits per month, we could avoid this unnecessary violence. Of course, you really should have paid up sooner. We didn't even know they were there sooner. Now that our attack is underway, we have no choice but to increase our prices, so are you ready to pay up now? We'll be seeing a lot of these pirates, but this is sort of the initial scripted greeting of them, if you will, which happens when you build a ship. And we are going to accept their protection because, if not, very bad things would happen to us. We have no chance against them. So away they go, and they're going to let us know our first starship has indeed been constructed. The Slippery Prize. This event marks the beginning of our return to the stars. We need to continue to expand and explore, build more ships to establish a thriving solar empire, and indeed, we fully intend to do that. Now, with the amount that we are paying... Now, notice here is their ship, by the way, the Whaling Vindication, and you can see that it's got firepower, and it's got shields, and it's got boarding pods. In other words, it has a bunch of things that we have not even conceived of yet, so that's kind of why we're just going to say, you know what? We are just fine without dealing with you. Thank you very much. We can just tab on our exploration ships, which are moving to their orbital place, and we'll be able to use them. And our cash flow is negative, but that's temporary. That's just because we're paying out to the pirates at the moment. So we have noticed the pirate raid on our homeworld Reese, and this is an interesting blurb worth reading. In the past, there were rumors of secret visits from star travelers, but recently these visitors have begun to appear openly. Some are hostile, taking whatever they want by force, and others come in peace. Ancient legends speak of a time when our own ancestors traveled among the stars, but with the great forgetting, all this knowledge was lost. And that's very much talking about what was in the cinematic, the ancient galaxy period, civilizations collapsed, etc. People say it is now time for us to return to the stars with the technology we have acquired from some of our stellar visitors. It should be possible to once again become a spacefaring civilization. Okay, so in case we didn't know that was in our future, now we do. So we're just waiting for our... there we go. Retrofitting has been completed. So we are going to want to... Dire Impulse is the other one. We're going to want to send off these exploration ships, but at the same time, we are also going to need to build a new type of ship capable of exploiting resources should we run into them. That is going to be coming up in the next episode, where we will do our exploration in earnest. Until then, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon with more Distant Worlds Universe.